Sean, I've known you and known of you 7, 8 years now. Um,
Yeah.
it's I think the first time I ran into you was Heroes and Legends over in Fort Wayne, Indiana, 2017 or 18, I think. And a couple years after that, I noticed you were doing some work with the paranormal world. I
Yeah.
kind of want to start there. What
Okay.
got you into the paranormal world and paranormal investigations and all that whole world? Because I love that stuff. I had to get out of it for a couple reasons, but what interested you about that?
Well, I've kind of always been interested in it. Not really as pursuing uh, being a paranormal investigator or anything like that. But I think we've all grown up and seen some of the shows that have been on TV and tuned in and like, oh yeah, that looks pretty cool. Now the shows have changed quite a bit over the years. They've gone more from reality to entertainment, but whatever fits the bill, I guess.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it was really just kind of watching these shows and having an interest in all things spooky, I guess you could say. And several years ago, I saw something on Facebook that there was a paranormal team local to me that was looking for some new members. And so I reached out, and the next thing I know, I'm part of this team. And it was quite a eye-opening experience. Well, it has been over the years actually, because you come to find out what's really involved. You watch these shows on TV, and of course, I have my own podcast as well, and it's mostly about the paranormal, supernatural, unexplained kind of thing. And um, I have interviewed and talked to many people, a lot of people that are on some of these TV shows, and you come to find out that what you're watching in a 45-minute episode on television takes a week, week and a half, 2 weeks to put together. It's done as a production. Um, when I go out to investigate with people, you go for an overnight or you go for 2 days, and you're in this location and you're doing your own investigating. And then after it's all done, you've got all these hours of video and all these hours of audio to go through. But, getting started just happened to be a right place, right time kind of deal. Um, but yeah, it opens your eyes to a little bit of what you're seeing on TV is not believing. There's a couple shows out there that are more legitimate than others, but again, as in the paranormal community right now, there's a couple of big issues. One of them is people getting into this for what I like to call fortune and glory. I can tell you firsthand that you are not going to get rich off of being a paranormal investigator. You will, and just like even if you're not on TV, you will spend more money than you'll ever make.
Yeah.
In fact, the TV show Ghost Hunters, Jason Hawes, who is the leader of that team and the star of that show, he still to this day has a job working with Roto-Rooter. TV doesn't
Right.
necessarily make you a millionaire. So one of the big issues right now is people trying to chase their 15 minutes of fame. It's no different than in pro wrestling sometimes. You know,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
uh, everybody wants to be famous, and in the paranormal community, it's not what it should be about because we're all trying to find answers.
Right.
Um, in pro wrestling, everybody wants to be on TV, and that's fine because that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
If you're in pro wrestling, if you're on the independents, your goal is to eventually be on TV, whether it's whether it's you know NXT or whether it's New Japan. Whether you're an extra on Monday Night Raw, you want to be on TV, and that's the goal.
Yeah.
But in something like the paranormal, that should not be the goal, and unfortunately, it kind of is for some people right now. So but yeah, I mean, going back to the start of this, like I said, it was just happenstance. I was in the right place at the right time. I saw the right thing on Facebook, and it's been a journey ever since.
So Working in pro wrestling, it's easy to tell when guys aren't in it for the right reasons. You can usually
Mhm.
tell when they're in it to get famous or just for the money, and they're not in it because they genuinely love it a lot. You can
Right.
usually pick it out pretty quickly when you've been in the business for a few years now.
Sure.
Is it the same way in the paranormal world as well? When you've been in it for 7 or 8 years, you can pick it out pretty easily who's not legit.
It becomes a little bit easier. I think it's human nature for us to want to be recognized for something. Um, Most people that are in the paranormal field realize that you are not going to make a whole lot of money, even if you have a TV show, or even if you appear on a TV show for a brief moment in time, because that's when the convention scene starts to come in, where you're able to appear at conventions. And
Mhm.
I've been fortunate enough. I've gone through a bit of a transition here lately. The team that I was with, the one that I initially mentioned, I'm no longer with.
Right.
We had a podcast as well that started from the ground up. We ended up with 25,000 listeners in 40 countries. So 126 episodes I was a part of that for. It was huge. I'm no longer a part of that. I've kind of gone my own way now. But the situation that I left because the other members were looking for that recognition. They were looking
Mhm.
for their I don't know if I want to say fame, but they were looking for more, and it became less about the end goal of getting answers and more about, hey, look at me.
Right.
And that's not where I wanted to be. You can sometimes tell what people are out for, um, but we all start on the same level. We all progress at the same level. We all come in not knowing much, and then we progress up the scale and learn and find out more information. And there is a point, I think, in every investigator's uh, paranormal life where you get to that crossroads and you have to decide, do I want to keep doing this just to keep doing the same old thing, or do I want to try and get to something bigger? I have been fortunate enough to meet a whole lot of people over the years, not just people from TV, but other investigators from across the country, across the world, to be quite honest with you. And you learn pretty quick who's legit and who's not. I can't say that I've met very many people in pro wrestling over my career that are not legit, because everybody that's in pro wrestling realizes that it's work. You have to put in the work, and you're going to go through the hurt. You're going to go through the whole gamut of things. So, and like I said, I guess it kind of goes back to what I was just talking about, where in pro wrestling, the goal is to keep moving up, and the goal is to make a name for yourself. Whereas
Mhm.
in the paranormal, that's not the goal, at least for most of us. So,
Right.
is it easy to pick out those people with paranormal? It can be after a while. Um, but yeah, like I said, it shouldn't be the goal.
Right. Right. One thing that I feel like a lot of people struggle with when it comes to paranormal investigations, one thing I've come across is they get into it whether it's to find answers or to see if it's a real thing, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when you go on an investigation and you come across the place that is legitimately active and
Mhm.
whether you want to use the word haunted or whatever, the fear factor that a lot of people aren't necessarily ready for. Um, how did you prepare for that, and how did you deal with that? Was it ever a problem for you getting to a place that's like very active that maybe, holy crap, I wasn't ready for this. What is this? Because we all deal with it differently.
Um, I can't say I've really. I approach it a little bit differently. There are locations across this country and across the world that are reportedly full of evil, and the whole demon word is really been a big issue in the paranormal now, because if you go to YouTube and you start looking up paranormal videos, it's "we caught a demon," or it really is.
Yeah.
And it was a huge problem for a long time. It's
Yeah.
starting to go away, but 99.9% of us in the paranormal field will never ever encounter anything remotely demonic. It's just it doesn't work like that. But you have to have, I think we're talking about, like, the fight or flight response and stuff like that. Like, I have I have been in one situation like that, and it wasn't in some creepy rundown ceiling falling in type of place. I was in a place here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, called the Bell Mansion, which I actually was a part of for a couple of years.
Yeah.
It was during a convention that we were having, and there was someone that was in the building attending this convention as a just a guest,
Hmm.
and they had that vibe about them, and it wasn't the kind of vibe where you have to have some kind of psychic ability to recognize. You just look at this person, you're like, I don't know about that guy. Well, it was a situation that turned into me having to grab one of the very well-known psychic mediums that was there at the time, letting her know what was going on. And let's just say that this, I don't know if I want to say entity or energy, was confronted, and methods were used to basically get it out.
Hmm.
Um, I was born and raised Catholic. I haven't attended a Catholic church since I was in like third grade, but I was told to start reciting the Our Father prayer, and it came back to me like I had never gone a day without saying it. It was really weird. The whole experience was very creepy. It was mildly terrifying, but I was with somebody that was used to this kind of thing, and they've dealt with this kind of thing before. It was like out of a movie, honestly. It was involved
Hmm.
her, throwing holy water and prayer, and it was really wild. But the entire situation went unnoticed by everybody else in the building.
Hmm.
So, once it was done, it was done, and it's something that I'll always remember, because it was probably the scariest thing that I've ever dealt with. Um, as far as personal experiences, also happened at the Bell Mansion. We were doing an investigation at night with two other teams. One was Bump in the Night Society. They're out of Pennsylvania. And then the other one was a pretty well-known investigator named Kalani Smith. He goes by Kalani Ghost Hunter. Millions of followers on social media and all that. He's very well known. And one of the investigators said that they thought they saw a head pop out of a doorway. So I stand up, grab my phone, turn on the video, and start walking over there. So I get up to the door, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, this is where you saw it. And at that point, you start breaking things down. You're like, okay, could it have been this? Could it have been this? Whatever. So as I'm talking, I feel this warm breath on my right cheek. At the same time, I hear it. I heard it. I felt it. I was like, wow, that was pretty wild. Not only was that audio picked up on my phone, it was picked up by the video camera of one of the other teams. So not only did I experience it, but I had the evidence to prove that it happened. Was it scary? No, I was more like, holy crap, than anything else. Like, it's very rare to experience something like
Yeah.
that. And I'll never forget it. I remember what it felt like. I remember what it sounded like. But honestly, those are probably the two biggest experiences that I've ever had. Um, and I've been to a couple locations that are supposedly negative places. I haven't experienced that negativity. Some of it is just story, some of
Yeah.
it is someone else's personal experience. So you can't go in with any preconceived notions, because you will set the tone for the rest of that night. If you go in thinking some demon's going to bite you on the butt cheek by the end of the night, something's probably going to happen. So you set
Yeah.
you set your own precedent. But
Right.
as far as being really scared of something, I haven't really encountered that as a personal experience yet, because
Right.
it may happen. Who knows?
Right. So it came from the podcast. It's your
Yeah,
new show. It's your
it
podcast.
is.
This is yours. You created it
It
from the
is.
ground up. By the way, the amount of followers you've gotten in such a short period of time is oh my God, it's
Yeah,
unreal.
yeah, it's
Um,
crazy.
it's how does that feel, man? Because I know I follow you on socials. I keep tabs on you, and I know it wasn't an amicable split with you in your previous crew. And so
Yeah.
for you to have the support and the following you already have for something you've created on your own with this,
Mhm.
it's got to make it that much more special.
It does. When I left the team that I was a part of and the podcast that I was a part of, I made the decision to do it, and I wasn't going to turn back from it. And
Mhm.
I have tons of ideas in my head. I always do, whether it's paranormal related, wrestling related. I've got tons of things. And I'd already had all these ideas, but I was part of a team and I never had any reason to bring any of them to fruition.
Mhm.
But when I left the previous team that I was a part of, it was a crapshoot. I thought, well, people are either going to support me or they're going to delete me from their friends list. Either way, I was perfectly fine with that because that was their decision. I'm not, I don't mind if somebody doesn't want to be friends anymore. It's whatever. But
Yeah.
when I did that, the outpouring of support that I had was completely unexpected. I think I gained more friends and support than I lost. So, I knew that I had made the right decision. And, there's more to the situation that happened, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the first thing that I did, I brought out all the graphics and all the stuff that I was working on for that podcast idea. I created a TikTok, which I really never ever used before, and the only thing
Yeah.
that I wanted to do is get to 1,000 followers, which I know was a huge thing to accomplish because I
Yeah.
wanted to be able to do TikTok lives.
Right.
And I got to like 650 people in like a week and a half.
It's insane.
And TikTok messaged me and said, you can go live. And I'm like, oh, sweet. So I made a little video on TikTok and I said, hey, thank you for getting me here. TikTok
Yeah.
said I can go live. I'm good. I don't care about the numbers. And now I'm like 1,200 or something like that. But, it's when you make friends, you don't burn bridges, and you're true to who you are, people respect that. And when things change, and things always change, no matter what the subject is, you find out who supports you and who has your back.
Yeah.
And I still every day I receive messages, hey, can I be in your podcast? And I'm booked through December right now with the
That's
podcast.
awesome. That's amazing.
And in some cases I have to go 2 days a week. The week before last, I did a doubleheader episode. I had
Yeah.
uh, psychic medium friend of mine, and then Dustin Perry from Ghost Hunters all on the same night. So it worked out. I that's how I know I made the right decision,
Yeah.
and now I'm progressing through other projects.
Yeah, and I see it all the time with music and bands because I've been covering music. I actually just came from covering a concert. Like when
Yeah,
people leave a project, it's not a guarantee that fans are going to go with them. You see it all
right.
the time where people leave a notable band or get traded from a team to another team. The fan base doesn't always follow. So the fact that they
Yeah,
went with you and
right.
they're supporting you, like I mean, you've got a hell of a product. You've got a hell of a show. The presentation is good. And one thing I learned from Front Row Report is presentation is everything, man. If you've got a good
Yeah,
presentation to go along with a good product, it goes a long way, and
yeah.
you definitely do. I love the font. I love the picture. I love the whole
The
thing,
old
man.
1940s,
Yes,
50s sci-fi.
yes,
And and
yes.
that's one thing I wanted to, be different about this podcast, whereas the one that I was a part of previously, it was mostly paranormal related.
Right.
This one is, paranormal cryptids, true crime, conspiracies. It's everything, and there's always someone out there that in any of these subjects to put on.
Oh,
So
it's amazing. I recently had, I don't know if the name Chris McKinnell means anything to you, but
absolutely,
yes,
absolutely, love Chris.
I had him on, and it was the most amazing conversation ever.
Was he down in
Yeah,
Central America when you had him on?
yes, he
Yeah,
was. Yes,
yeah.
nicest guy ever.
Oh yeah, and
He's
smart.
yes,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
yeah.
Let's shift gears, man. Let's talk wrestling.
Sure.
We did
Hey,
20, 30 minutes on paranormal. Let's talk some pro wrestling, man. We both
let's do
work
it.
in it. The one thing that wrestling and paranormal have in common is if you work in it, you're constantly trying to convince people and prove to people that it's not a fake thing. It's more real, much more real than they realize it is. And unless you're in
Yeah.
it, you don't believe it. But Heroes and Legends, you've been with Heroes and Legends for God, how since the beginning? How long have you
Yeah,
been with
it's
Jason?
been going on, well, going on about 15 years because I was with before it became Heroes and Legends, it was EWF, the Extreme Wrestling Federation.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I was with Jason Maples
Yeah.
before Heroes and Legends. So I was there before and then after the transition and everything. So about 15 years.
Right. So Heroes and Legends, and then Funkafied Pro Wrestling FWF up in Fort
Funkafied
Wayne.
Wrestling, yeah, that's
Yes.
Brian Johnson, Lightning Bolt Johnson. It's
Yes.
been his company out of Warsaw, Indiana, that he's had for many, many years. Packs a house over there every night, and he messaged me one night and said, "Hey, thinking about bringing FWF to Fort Wayne. Do you want in?" And I said, "Brother, you got me. I'm there." So yeah, so now he's running the shows in Warsaw, and then he's got the shows he's running here at Pierce in Fort Wayne.
Here's is my favorite venue ever.
Yeah,
Hollywood Undead said it best when I interviewed them. You walk in and it's just, you don't know really what to expect. You're like, man, but
yeah,
then the lights go down and it's magic in that building, man. Like
yeah.
it's a party in that building. But what is the difference between what you do with Heroes and Legends and what you do with FWF, or is it the same role?
It's not really the same role with Heroes and Legends. I working really close with Jason Maples, who's my best friend in the whole world. Unfortunately, he doesn't live up here anymore, so that's why we've got something different going on down there. But
Right.
with Heroes and Legends, Jason, we got to a point over the years because I didn't start out doing now or doing then what I do now, but it got to the point over the years where Jason was able to sit up front, greet the guests as they come in, deal with the merch, and do his thing, and know that everything else in the entire building was under control. Everything from locker room management, which of course we have our locker room leaders for that really, but
Yeah.
I would do up all the cards, I would do the times, I would make sure people are where they're at when they're
Oh,
supposed to be. So essentially everything from gorilla back is what I kind of assumed. And I mean, as well as I do, at the end of the night, I think I said to you the other day, you felt like you just worked a 12-hour shift at a factory.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you feel like you took 20 bumps that whole night. You're sore, but it's a great feeling. But
Yeah.
um, so yeah, with there, I'm pretty much,
Yeah.
I don't want to say running the show, but running the show.
Yeah.
With FWF, I'm more of a help to Brian and helping keep things organized while he does whatever he's got to do, but not on the same level. I'm not putting cards together. I'm not putting music together. I'm not controlling the locker room. He's got his locker room people that have been with
Mhm.
him for years. And so I feel more like I'm an invited guest who's there to help.
Yeah.
And that's really it.
Yeah.
I'm not really stepping into a leadership role or anything like
Mhm.
that. I'm here to help because I love what he does. He's a great person, and I want FWF to succeed here in Fort Wayne. So,
Yeah. I had a role similar to that with a promotion in Danville, Indiana, a few years ago, where I'm still not sure what my job actually was. I
right,
was backstage person that if it needs done, I help get it done, you
right.
know? Whereas at WCWO, where I'm at full time, it's like similar to
Hmm.
what you do at Heroes Legends, where it's like helping with the card, helping with creative,
Yep.
running backstage, making sure guys know that their match is next, all
And
that
let's just
stuff.
say what a great promotion
Oh,
WCWO
dude,
is
thank
too,
you.
man. I mean,
I
what a bunch
appreciate
of
it.
great people down there. I
I
haven't
appreciate
had
it.
the chance to get down there, but I keep in touch with most of the people
Yeah.
there, and keep the updates. But yeah,
It's home. It's
yeah,
home and it's a lot to run a wrestling show 52 weeks a year, if not more, every Friday night and
yeah,
keep it flowing consistently is freaking hard. And people don't
yeah.
appreciate what goes into that.
No,
But on your end of things, we all didn't, nobody came from wrestling originally, unless you grew up in the business. How did you get connected with Jason and Heroes and Legends and EWF it was?
it was EW at this time, yeah.
How did you get in it? How did you connect? Because 15 years
I
ago it
love
was not
telling
as
this
easy
story.
as now.
I love telling this story, and it's funny because I was on a podcast last night and this topic came up. I love telling this story. I had to tell it a little bit differently because that wasn't a wrestling podcast, but I'm going to tell it the right way this time because everybody knows what I mean when I say a certain word. You'll get it.
Let's do it.
Um, I was in the cell phone business for a number of years. I worked for many different companies, and I worked inside of Sam's Club here in
Okay.
Fort Wayne. They had a cell phone kiosk.
Right.
So I was helping this guy out, and he was a midget. And he said, "Hey, I've got this midget wrestling show tonight in downtown Fort Wayne. Here's a couple tickets for you, man, if you want to come out." My first thought was, "Oh my God, this is going to be the funniest thing I ever saw in my life." So I'm like, "Yes, I will definitely go." So I came home and I told my wife, I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to watch midget wrestling tonight." She's like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to check it out." So I go down there, show's going on for a while, and I'm like, this is some of the greatest wrestling I've seen. Like, I expected this to be a complete comedy act. I'd never watched it before. And of course, now there's entire promotions, micro wrestling, and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so as the show's going on, I'm like, oh my God, these guys are really talented. The ring is like 6 foot by 6 foot, but these guys, I mean, it's fantastic. So I eventually notice who the promoter is. I can tell because he's this gigantic dude, looks like Bam Bam Bigelow, and he's sitting there in his singlet. And so I went over to him and I introduced myself and I said, "Hey, I said, I got these tickets from so and so and I didn't know what to expect. Man, this is pretty cool." And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, my name's Jason Maples." And he said, "I'm actually helping somebody out, with this one here." He's like, I run EWF wrestling. And at the time, I didn't know jack about indie wrestling. It was WWE and it was really TNA. That's really all I knew.
Yeah. No.
And so I'm talking to him and I said, "Yeah, I love watching wrestling on TV." I said, "It'd be really cool to, be able to be a part of it, like not really to be a wrestler, but, just to do something." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what." He said, "Would you like to come and film a show for me?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I can hold a camera. That's cool." So he told me where to be and when to be there. And so I showed up at a strip club in Fort Wayne where the wrestling ring was set up outside. And I filmed an entire show. I remember every single person I met that day. I remember what happened after the show. And so essentially began my pro wrestling filming career with EWF. As time kind of went on, um, I let Jason know I actually went to art school in Chicago, so I got a little bit of graphic design background. So I started doing intro graphics and running audio. And, like I said, just kind of progressed from there. Eventually, EWF became Heroes and Legends back in 2012.
Mhm.
And that was the time that Osiris, as he was at the time, went to hit me with the chair. And then I started putting myself in situations I shouldn't have been in, like chasing Nick Cutler up a cage and all
Funny
kind
how
of
that
crazy stuff.
happens so organically, by the way. Like,
I don't know.
it's just crazy. I've been in those same situations. It's crazy how that happens, and it was never
It
supposed to
is.
happen. Like, you know.
It is.
Um,
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, again, my brain is full of ideas. But when I'm doing something that I love, it's easy to do and it's not work. And
yeah.
I but I worked to let Jason know that, hey, I am capable of doing so much. And if that opportunity comes up and you need me, I will be there for that. And that's, kind of how it evolved, really.
Right.
Um, I think I was, I mean, probably firsthand how hard it is to be accepted by the boys and to be part of that. And that for me,
Yeah.
I think came really quickly for some reason. And I don't know if it's just because they perceive me as being a good person, or I don't know what the situation was, but that happened faster. Looking back on
Mhm.
it, and now looking at how it is nowadays, it's not easy to be accepted by the boys. You got to prove
Oh yeah.
yourself, and
Yeah. It,
I'm grateful for that and all these people that I've made friends with over these years.
yeah, it can be hard. And when I came in, I did not come from wrestling at all. I came in the middle of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, and I was
Mhm.
the entertainment interview guy that is all of a sudden working backstage
Right.
in the wrestling promotion. And there's a lot of, guys that have been there for a long time that
Mhm.
it took a while for me to win them over. The younger guys were a lot easier because they could tell I genuinely wanted to make a difference and do a good job and make the place better. But there's always going to be
Right.
those veteran guys that you didn't come from wrestling. I don't trust you. And
Yeah.
oh man, it's harder. I
Yeah.
would assume it would be harder at Heroes and Legends because I always love Heroes and Legends because it's your indie guys, but it's also your legends, your
Mhm.
names, you know.
Yeah.
I would assume it would be harder to win that locker room over because you've got the guys that have been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years coming through, and who the hell is this guy coming in
Right.
telling me what I'm gonna do on the
Yeah.
show? First off, how hard was it to get used to walking through a locker room and DDP, uh, um, Kurt Angle, Sting, these guys are here.
Ric
Like,
Flair, Mark Henry. Yeah. Um,
not always an easy time to,
Um,
I would think.
Sometimes intimidating, but
Yeah.
I think I was fortunate enough in the pro wrestling journey that when I was with EWF, I started interacting with these people early. Like I did an interview with Carlito on video and he spit an apple in my face. These were mark out moments, and I still have them. We all have them. Anybody
Yeah.
that says they don't is a liar. Um, doing stupid stuff with Road Dogg and Billy Gunn in a playground in Converse, Indiana.
Oh,
Um, hanging out backstage with Jimmy Hart and wearing his Hall of Fame ring. So I think I was fortunate enough to have interaction with these people early on in this career.
okay.
Um, that I don't want to say it desensitized me, but it made me a little bit less of a mark. Now,
Yeah.
I will say that when I'm at the War Memorial Coliseum in Fort Wayne and I go back into the office, and as soon as I open up the door, there's Sting in full face paint and uniform, I stopped in my tracks and I was like a 10-year-old kid. So I introduced myself and he introduced himself as Randy Macho Man Savage. So I always have that memory. Um,
I love
but
that. That's great.
going back to earning your place, it kind of ties along with that. I've been and I say this because I think it needs to be sent this way. I've been allowed to step in the ring with some of these people. Um, the veterans, the names, they're the ones that I don't want to say make the rules, but whatever they say pretty much is going to go unless there's a big issue.
Yeah.
So if Sting says this is what's going to happen, and you are an indie guy that's worked for the company for 10 years, guess what? Your 10 years is great, but Sting just told you what you're going to do, and you're going to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think over the years it's become much easier because I've made friends with a lot of these guys. I've got phone numbers on my phone that 10-year-old me would be like, oh, really? Uh,
Right.
and yeah,
Yeah.
and so it's become easier, but I still have my mark out moments for sure.
I, for I think for me, the fact that I was, and maybe it may be the same thing for you, but the fact that I was willing to get in the ring and whatever you guys want to do, I'll do. As long as
Right.
it's safe. I trust you. I'll go in
Yeah.
there. I'll
Oh
let
yeah.
you slam me. I'll take a bump. I'll do not many. The fact that you hear veterans say it all the time, like, have you ever been in the ring? Have you ever taken a bump? If you haven't, the fact that you were willing to go in there and you're willing to go in there and do that stuff and get physical and put your body out there, I would assume that that would
Sure.
help with a lot of guys, really win them over, because I feel like that helped with me to a degree as well.
A little bit, yeah. And there have been occasions where I have inserted myself into certain storylines. Like for the longest time, Drew Skills and I had a thing going on. Nick Cutler and I had a thing going on,
Nick Cutler's got a
and
lot of things going on with a lot of people from what I've
yeah,
seen over
yeah,
the,
right.
you know.
But yeah, it became,
Yeah.
it turned in from, hey, here's this idea. Do you think I can do this? Because you always ask the permission. You don't just assume, hey, I'm going to do this. And it's either yes or no. And you go with that. But the trust factor, of course, is always there. There, for example, I can think of a couple times. One of them, like I said, chasing Nick Cutler up the steel cage and giving him a low blow. That was his idea. That wasn't mine. I was like, hey, I want
Right.
to screw you over somehow, but how do I, And he's like,
Yeah.
okay, so here's what we'll do. Being able to be in the ring with Bob Holly and Drew Skills. And then at the end of that, Bob Holly tries picking me up and slap me in the face. Little things like that where you're allowed into that
Yeah.
area
Yeah.
for a while. But I trust everybody that I work with. I try every time I'm doing something with somebody. And like you said, sometimes they'll ask, like we did this thing where it was this in the storyline with Drew Skills. It was Drew versus Abyss, and we had Abyss that night. Of course, he had the big, and it
Yes.
was actually I was kind of Abyss's manager at that point, and then I got in the ring and low blowed him and screwed him over. But the first thing that he asked me as he's spitting out these ideas, he goes, "Do you want to take the black hole slam?" And I regret saying no because I just didn't feel good that night. But it's one of my biggest regrets is that
Oh
I
man.
passed in a black hole slam from Abyss. But that's a point where you get there, you get to a point where people have that confidence factor and belief in you, and you have it in them, and
Hmm.
it's a comfortable place to be when you're working with a bunch of solid people like that.
As an on-screen management figure, a lot of the time,
Mm-hmm.
have you worked babyface and heel, or just one or the other?
Yeah, both actually.
Which one do you
Yeah.
prefer?
I like being the bad guy, I think.
Oh yes,
You
it's
know,
so
I
much
I
fun.
I like to be the Shane McMahon
Okay.
type character, where he can go from good to bad, but I think I like the bad guy. I like the reaction. And now that I think of this, it's crazy. I can't remember what point it was, but I came to this realization that, and you've probably experienced this too. You come out of the curtain, you hear everybody, you see everybody, you're slapping hands, you're doing whatever. Then you get up in the ring, you have the microphone in your hand, and you can't see or hear anybody. Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
crazy. Everything
So weird.
disappears.
Yes,
It's
it's weird.
weird. Yeah.
It really is. Yes, was in a storyline with our top baby face a couple years ago, which for some reason culminated me being in a cage match with him, which I thought was a rib, but it was not. And I was the evil on-screen, authority figure. And
Yeah.
to come out and have 100 plus people just deafeningly boo,
Yeah.
just, but then I got in the ring and that cage door closed and I couldn't hear a
Yeah.
thing except for what was in the ring. It
Yeah.
was the weird. You can't describe it unless you're
No.
there and you've had it. But there's no
Yeah.
better feeling to me than when the baby face is about to get that, he's about to win, and here you
Yeah.
come, and you
Yeah.
just kill it. It's the best feeling ever, man.
Yeah.
For me, it's just more genuine to be the bad guy. When I was a baby face, it just seemed it was forced. It was
Yeah.
just so in
Yeah.
ingenuine, man. Like
Yeah.
it just wasn't legit.
Mhm.
It seemed like
Yeah.
FWF, man. What do you
Yeah.
love the most about being at FW? Obviously, Heroes and Legends, being able to do the role that you have, work with the names that you've been able to work with.
Mhm.
FWF is a completely different ballgame, man. What do you love about
It is.
FWF?
I love the fact that somebody that I respect and trust is leading that company. In Brian Johnson, he's a fantastic guy. Always had a fantastic relationship over the years. I love that he already has his following. He's got his fans anywhere he goes. The first show that FWF did at Pierre's a couple months ago filled the house. I love the environment in his locker room. It's 99% people that I already know, which was a big part of him wanting to bring me on board, is that I already knew these guys and I knew that I wouldn't have to really convince any of them of anything, but just the way that he runs his business and the locker room that he has are my favorite parts.
Yeah, I haven't been to one of the shows yet, but for what I've seen, it looks like a great time. The
Oh
crowd
yeah,
looks awesome.
crowds are
Um,
hot all night long for his shows.
right.
Yeah,
For you, what makes a wrestling show good? When you because we've all had our bad shows. We've all had
yeah,
we've all had the bad ones, man. But
yeah.
for you, what makes a show stand out for you? What makes it good for you? And what are you looking for?
Smiles on faces. In the end, it comes down to if you make money or not. But that goes with anything. But from a genuine standpoint, when you can see people standing out of their seats, when you can see kids with smiles on their faces, knowing that people genuinely had a great time and they're hopefully going to come back, that's how that's how you know that everyone did their job that night. From the people selling uh, churros up front to the guys in back who just put their bodies on the line so people could be entertained. When the crowd is happy, genuinely happy, that's how you know it was a success.
Yeah, definitely. Joey and I from WCWO, him and I talk
Yeah,
about all the time about how pro wrestling can make you the happiest you've ever been and the most miserable you've ever been. Like it will
yeah,
make you just hate life sometimes. And when it
yeah.
sucks, it's the worst. But
I
what
actually met Joey through EWF back
really?
many all those years ago.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh man, that goes way back.
yeah.
Man.
when he wasn't just a kid.
Man, what makes you fall back in love with wrestling when you're having a hard time? When wrestling sucks, what makes you fall back in love with it?
Going back to the old school stuff that I used to love. you know, and I don't really think that there's a point in time where wrestling sucks. I think there's a point in time where people get too caught up in who's doing what to who. Wrestling is there's always good wrestling. It's
Yeah.
some of the storylines that are kind of garbage sometimes, but
Yeah.
I I mean, I always love going back to the Attitude Era. You know, uh, that's when wrestling was the most fun, and I think
Yeah.
it's kind of going to start going back that direction here too.
I think
Once
it's already start.
WWE heads to
I think
Netflix
it's
and
already.
stuff, so
I think it's already
um,
started.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, it pretty kind of has, hasn't it?
yeah. For me, man,
Uh,
it's the egos that can kill it sometimes because when you're running a weekly show, man, it's so easy to just that one
yeah,
person sometimes can just make it hard for everybody. But like when everybody in the locker room is on the same page and no egos on that show and wanting to put on the best show ever, and then you go out and everybody does the absolute best, like it is
mhm,
just magic. And
yeah,
that's when things are the best for me. I feel like
yeah.
just
And
everybody wanting.
it's funny too because I always said, I there was a point in time several years ago where I thought, it would be great, the best wrestling show to ever be created. You get a bunch of indie guys and a bunch of wrestlers to start their own company and write their own stories. And then AEW comes along, and I'm like, well, that apparently doesn't work. Talk about ego and everything else like that.
Oh man. Oh, dude, we could do a whole episode on AEW, man.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
oh, dude. I guess I'll ask you the same question about paranormal, man, because you've
Yeah.
had some tough times recently with it, and you've had your heart broken by it or by
Mhm.
people within it, man.
Yeah.
What makes you fall back in love with it? What makes you want to keep doing, the world of paranormal when things aren't going well?
Again, it kind of comes back to the people that I'm associated with. Other people lift you up and make you want to keep going. And it's, again, the same in pro wrestling. You've got when the chips are down and when you're going through a rough time, that locker room is there to pick you back up and put you on your feet. It's no different in the paranormal. You're always going to have your good times. You're always going to have your bad times. But if you just stop and sit down and try to put it in the rearview mirror, you're doing yourself a disservice. So you got to look to those around you to pick you back up and keep you going. I mean,
Yeah.
there's not much more to it than that, honestly.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. This might be a generic question for you, but I'm genuinely interested in the world of wrestling with heroes and legends. Is there
Yeah.
anybody you saw coming across the line on when Jason would tell you, "Oh, we got so and so coming through," that maybe you were like, "Man, how's this gonna go?" And you were genuinely surprised in a good way about how good they were to work with.
Well,
We could ask the
well,
other way, but we're not going to do that.
I was gonna tell you, I could tell you some horror stories. Jake Hager, I despise that man with every fiber of my being.
Well, let's
Um,
go down that road. Who did you not like working with?
this is another Nick Cutler story, and he tells it the best. But it was Jake Hager, who we had as Jack Swagger at the time,
Right.
and versus Nick Cutler, and I think they had 9 or 10 minutes, and it keeps going and going,
Oh
and so
no.
these guys know my Iggy when they see me, they know, and so I step up there. Nick Cutler sees me, and he nods, and they keep going and going. And so I come out again. And Nick sees me this time, and he just shakes his head. So they end up going, I don't know, 20 minutes, something
Oh,
ridiculous. I'm fuming. I'm
they
absolutely
doubled. Oh,
fuming.
they double. Oh no.
It was ridiculous. And so as soon as Nick comes back there, Jake he disappears back to I don't know where he went to. And Nick's like, dude, I tried to tell him to bring it home like 5 times, and he kept saying, "Keep going." Like, all right. Well, I decided to puff up my chest, and I'm going to go have a talk with Mr. Jack Swagger, who's like 18 times my size. So I go back and I find him in the locker room, and I say, "Hey," I said, I asked you guys to bring it home like 4 or 5 times. What happened? And he looks me dead in my eyes and he says, I told Nick to keep going. I had nothing, dude. I was like, all right. And I turned around and I left.
What do you say? Like,
That was it. That was the end of that. But again, it was a situation where, as a professional, he should already know because Nick had already
yeah.
told him multiple times. Come on,
Well,
dude. But
the promoter's the promoter, man. Like
yeah, and
they say, take it
sometimes
home.
that
They
doesn't matter to some of these guys.
It's true.
Again,
I've
their
had that on
ego.
our level with indie guys a lot, where there's
Yeah,
like, and sometimes
yeah,
you gotta take it home whether they want to or not, one way or another.
yeah.
Who are some of the best ones to work with though? Even if they're like, yeah, you're even if they're ones that, like I said, you're like, I'm not excited about this, and you walked away being like, that was surprisingly good.
Let's see. Man, there have been so many people.
Because I know Sting is one that was probably good to work
Oh, he
with.
was amazing. He was
I've
amazing.
never
Yeah,
heard
what
a
a
bad
great
thing
guy.
about him. Yeah.
Yeah, what a great guy. Like Ric Flair, that can go either way.
I've
That
heard
ended up
that.
with him being kicked out of a bar. Yeah.
I
Uh,
heard that. Yeah, I heard that story. Yeah.
let's see. Gosh, there have just been so many people, but anybody that I was really unsure about. Hmm. Oh, to be honest with you, it would have been Heroes and Legends 2 and Chris Masters.
Oh,
I I enjoyed him, during his WWE run, but I heard so many stories and I was like, I don't quite think this is going to end well.
right. Because you're the one that's going to be dealing with them the most out of all of the staff,
Yeah,
probably on the
actually,
show.
from the minute he arrived,
Yeah.
turned out to be not just an amazing person, but a fantastic worker.
Hmm.
Um, and I've had the opportunity to work with him, gosh, 3 or 4 times, I think already. Um, but
Nice.
yeah, that was definitely one of them. I didn't think
Nice.
that was going to be a good
That's a
situation.
surprising answer. I would never would have expected Chris Masters ever.
Now, keep in mind this was Heroes and Legends 2, so this was like what 2013 maybe. This is quite a
Mhm.
while ago.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, at that time I was not sure.
Right.
Um, let's see. At the time, Sunny Sunny ended up at the time she was a sweetheart. Little did we know what was going to happen, but
Well, that yeah, things happened, you
yeah,
know.
we had her at two
Um,
different shows. I think we had her at the same show with
Really?
Chris Masters. Yeah,
Okay.
the first time at the Parkview
Just
Field.
I just remember I was always constantly blown away with some of the talent that you guys would bring in for
Yeah,
that
me too.
show. And yeah, and then seeing the matches a lot of the
Hmm.
time. Like remember like seeing Jake Oman work MVP,
Yeah,
seeing just stuff like that
there's
was
another
really
cool dude too, MVP.
that's what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
But very, very blunt and straight to the point too, from what I've heard. He'll tell you what he thinks. So
His first impression of you determines your future relationship with MVP. Just
I
because
could,
he's that kind of guy.
yeah,
He's been through bad times in his life,
yeah,
and he's had to be around some not so great people
right.
in his journey through life, and
Mhm.
he doesn't play.
Right. That's
Um,
what I've heard. Yeah, just the matches that I was able to see because I photographed it ringside twice. I can't remember what years one was the year that Tracy Smothers was there one year. The main event was Drew Skills and Fala Ba, I think was the main event, I
oh yeah,
believe.
yeah.
Or Congo Kong and Fala what
It's
that
probably Congo Kong and followed by, I
yeah,
think, yeah,
yeah. And
because that
Fala
was around
was
the time. That was around the time that Steve was with Global Force Wrestling. I think back when
yes,
that was a
yes,
thing.
yes.
Yeah,
It was the year you had Tessa Blanchard there.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, just it was a really cool a convention and then a wrestling show right after. It was really cool. I'd
Mhm.
never been to
Yeah.
anything like that. Was constantly blown away by it. But I guess going back to it came from the podcast bucket list, man. Who do you want to have on the show when it's all said and done? Who are some of your your great white buffaloes?
Oh man, Josh Gates from Expedition Unknown and Expedition X. One of them I've actually got. I don't know if you're familiar with Ben Hansen at all.
That name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's
Yes.
been in a lot of the. I mean, he's been on so many different shows, but he's got a show right now on TMZ. He's got it on his own segment.
Okay.
Former FBI agent. I mean, he's
Hmm.
Factor Fake Paranormal Files is kind of where he got his start.
Okay.
He's also been on one of the shows with the Osbournes, and he's
Oh,
got quite
okay.
a resume. But I got him, and that's like
That's awesome.
it's like a golden calf right there.
Yes.
Um,
That's awesome.
let's see. Giorgio Tsoukalos from Ancient Aliens. Those
Nice.
are probably two at the top of my list. And then one of the only surviving people from the Amityville horror incident as well.
Really?
Mhm.
Nice.
He's very,
Wow.
very difficult to try and get, but we've talked
Wow.
before. It's been a while, but
You
so
think
yeah.
do you think that's a possibility that that might happen?
It's always a possibility. There are some people, as you know, in pro wrestling that just don't do much media type stuff, and they just kind of, aren't really down for that. He's one of those guys where he does stuff from time to time, but you got to understand these people have their own lives. There's times they want to talk about stuff, there's times they don't. So,
That makes
when it
sense.
comes to stuff like that, if it happens, it'll happen. Ben Hansen has been actually a little over 2 years in the making because when I first got in contact with him, he was contracted with Discovery Plus and
Okay.
wasn't able to do anything. And as soon as that was over, he contacted me and said, "Hey, let's do it."
Nice.
So,
Nice. Yeah, it's one thing I've learned is if you don't ask, the answer is always no. But if you do
yep,
ask, you might be amazed at how many times the answer is yes.
that's right.
You've got to take that shot. Like the interviews and
Yeah,
stuff I've been able to get over the last 13 years, just like
yeah,
sometimes I'm like, why is nobody stopping me from being here right now?
right.
Like, how is this real?
Yep.
Uh, man, I thank you for taking time to do this tonight. And man,
Hey, I
again,
appreciate it, man.
let's plug your stuff, man. Where can people find you? I mean, I'm still getting used to TikTok. I hate that TikTok has some of my highest amount of views of videos. It drives me crazy, but
Yeah.
it's a good tool, man.
It is, yeah. That's something I'm still working with too. But I guess every video is getting a few hundred views, so I guess that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find me on all social media: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. At It Came from the Podcast. You can find my Heroes and Legends profile. It's Director of Operations Sean Kaleta. Heroes and Legends Director of Operations Sean Kaleta. You can find me at Sean Kaleta on Facebook too if you want to see some dumb stuff I post on my own personal profile. Also on Facebook, Para Magazine, which is a new magazine that I've got coming out here next month. And then what else do I got going on? I'm starting up on my own paranormal investigation team, which I don't have any social media for yet. But yeah, head to It Came from the Podcast or Sean Kaleta just about anywhere, and you'll find dumb stuff about me that you probably don't want to know.
I
And
love it, man.
also be sure to follow Heroes and Legends Wrestling and Heroes and Legends Smoky Mountain Wrestling as well. Because
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that we've expanded down to Tennessee where Jason
Yes.
lives at. Got a
Yep.
show next April actually. So down there.
It's growing, man. And it's good to see good stuff happening to such a good dude, man. I followed you for years and you're just a
Yeah.
genuinely good person. And it is so good to see good stuff happening to you because man, you work your ass off,
Well, I
man.
appreciate that, man. I do.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Thanks for doing this again and congratulations
Of
on
course.
everything that's happening, man. And good luck on everything coming up.
Absolutely. I'm gonna have to get myself down to WCWO, man.
Come on out, man. Love to have you.